Quiet, numbskulls. I'm broadcasting.
Well, I'll be damned. It's the Gentleman Guppy. You know, he's like a turd that won't flush.
I want the girl.
Who's this Cooper clown? We gotta talk to that goofball now.
I don't think you want to do that.
Why? Why not?
That Cooper clown
Yeah?
Is one evil, egg-sucking son of a snake.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 10th installment here of our quarantine specials here at the FlicksationPodcast as we continue to do little one-off shows here as the pandemic continues. Some places are open, some places are not. Most places probably shouldn't be, but it's all political here in the U.S., so it'll probably never happen. But my name, Eric Madsen. I'm here at Flicksation Studios, P City, Wisco. The hottest day of the year so far. It's like 70, high 70s and humidity too, so it is absolutely miserable. I think it's 90 something, but it's supposed to feel like 104. It's supposed to be much nicer tomorrow, but pretty miserable. I am joined tonight, Christian Estabrook back, because you know when we have quality film programming on the show, Christian Estabrook's going to be in tow. Christian, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it's especially during the quarantine era, it really seems like, hey, we got this really weird movie that nobody would expect a podcast episode on. Let's get Christian. And I can't say no. I can't quit you guys.
All right. So, yeah, we were supposed to be a 4-man crew here tonight. We are only 2. The minister spurred most of the stuff we're talking about here tonight, but he had a last-minute thing to deal with, so he will not be joining us. I do have some hot takes, or whatever you want to call them, from the minister on these films, so there's a little bit of flavor from him in here. Chad also supposed to be here. Chad had a sick child who is on the mend now, had some respiratory issues, so we all know what that means. It did not turn out to be the case, so all is well. Just was unable to sneak the films in. I'm surprised he'd never seen either of these as well.
Shocking.
Yeah, he said he'd seen pieces of Mario, but never seen Waterworld.
I don't know, mainstream 80s, early 90s. It just seems like, Chad has taken the wheel
too,
here.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Double sci-fi, no Chad.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what we got tonight, folks. And I think Ron kind of stated this the best way. So we're talking about Waterworld and the Super Mario Brothers film from 1995 or whatever it is. They're both Dennis Hopper-driven flops. He is the main villain in both films, so that's just kind of the loose connection here. So we're just calling them. And they're both very big-budget movies and complete bombs at the theater level. Both of them ended up making their money back and doing quite well on the secondary market and stuff, so nobody lost any money with these things, but both considered box office flops, certainly in the domestic market. Now we'll be talking about those two films, and as I mentioned, Ron, we had mentioned on Twitter what we were up to tonight. Ron said, "Ooh, great, 2 fine films I haven't thought about for 20 years." So, yeah, it's kind of the thing for me. So, actually, I had never seen Super Mario Brothers from beginning to end. I had pretty much seen the whole movie. I don't think I ever sat down through the whole thing. I've always had it around. I knew a lot about it. I knew a lot of the iconic stuff from it, but never sat through the whole thing that I can remember. So sort of a first-time viewing, but not really for me on that one. Waterworld I had seen in the theater probably the day of or shortly after the day of release. I have not seen 10 seconds of it since, until I watched it just the other day. So oddly enough, that thing, it's almost like I remembered every second of that movie for some reason, which is kind of really weird. I'd all seen, oh God, yeah, I remembered everything as it happened. So that's where I'm at on this, Christian. Any experience with these two films?
Yeah, a decent amount. So my story with these, the Super Mario Brothers movie came out in '93, so I would have been about 6 when this came out. So I mean, I was playing, the original NES Nintendo when I was, a toddler. This is going to be Super Nintendo era. So this is heyday. This might be peak Mario for my life. That 5 to 9 age range, like somewhere in there, like that's key Mario time. So I was all over this. Definitely didn't see it in theaters, but this was a VHS staple. I don't know how many times I've seen it, but it's definitely more than a couple, for sure. So that's the one I was intimately familiar with. You mentioned that you remembered a lot of Waterworld. I remembered the vast majority of the Super Mario Brothers movies. Like I could recall very specific imagery and moments and jokes and needle drops, some killer music in that one. I'm sure we'll touch base on that. But yes, very familiar with Super Mario Brothers, but have not seen it in over 20 years for sure. Like not a chance I've seen in the last 20 years. Waterworld, I'm fairly certain I saw one time. This was like a rental, also a VHS pick, watched it one time and remember thinking it was okay. And, never really thought about it too much since then. So that's the one that was a bit hazier for me in my mind. But yeah, Waterworld once, Mario Brothers several times, not a chance I've seen either in 20 years for sure.
I'll just do the quick synopses here for both films. Super Mario Brothers, that one from 1993. 2 Brooklyn plumbers, Mario and Luigi, must travel to another dimension to rescue a princess from the evil dictator King Koopa and stop him from taking over the world. This one directed by Annabelle Jankel and Rocky Morton, a husband-wife team that really didn't do much other serious work at least as directors. They are behind Max Headroom, for those of you who remember him from the late 80s. Not going to go into that right now. This one written by Parker Bennett and Terry Runty, and I'm going to come back around to the writer, at least one of the writers here in a minute, or not even in a minute, probably later on, but come back around to that, starring Bob Hoskins, John Leguizamo, and the aforementioned Dennis Hopper. Mm-hmm. Waterworld, that one was from 1995. In a future where the polar ice caps have melted and Earth is almost entirely submerged, a mutated mariner fights starvation and outlaw smokers and reluctantly helps a woman and a young girl try to find dry land. Kevin Costner, Ginny Triplehorn, and Dennis Hopper star in this one, and Kevin Reynolds is the director. Kevin Reynolds has done a few big budget things over the years. This was his follow-up to Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, also with Kevin Costner, which was 4 years prior to this one. So there's that team. Incidentally, that team didn't work out so well this time around, as it sounded like Costner was pretty much a gigantic asshole the whole time. Did a whole bunch of rewrites right at the end that was just stuff demanded by Costner with no bearing on the story and stuff. So Costner had his way here. Apparently Reynolds quit something like 3/4 of the way through the film, and Costner just took over, even though he was kind of running it the whole time anyway. Backseat directing and whatnot. So I don't know, that's probably what went on Prince of Thieves too, but I did not dig into that too much. So yeah, the creators here wanted to specifically rip off Mad Max, Christian. So that's what they set out to do here.
Could have guessed.
Yeah. Mario, some funny stuff too. Apparently, Nintendo asked for creative control, but just decided to let whatever happened happen. They thought the movie probably looked terrible, but they also thought the property was bulletproof. So they weren't really concerned with the movie being bad or whatever. They just let it roll. And oddly enough, reading through some stuff on Wikipedia here, it at least claims that Jurassic Park, which was being made roughly at the same time or in pre-production at this time or whatever, greatly admired the dinosaur puppets from this movie. So, and I do see some praising here of this being like the magical film in the transition period between practical and digital effects. So this is apparently some of the stuff in this film was praised, even though watching it was just like, wow, this is like grade school. Like they weren't even lining up like, I don't know, shadows and stuff. It just looked completely off. Whatever. All right, Christian. So overall, are either of these a good movie?
Yeah, it's a great question, Eric. It's a great question. I'm gonna say probably not. I don't think I could go out on a limb. I did have a lot of fun catching up with both of these, but to make the statement either is a good movie, I don't know if I'm quite willing to do that, to be honest. And it's interesting, like you set them up, both together in the conversation. We'll kind of jump around here. But I kind of feel pretty similar about both of them. These are movies that have pretty terrible reputations. I think Super Mario Brothers has more of a cult following that endures today. Waterworld seems mostly forgotten at this point, to be honest. But they're movies that, have very negative reputations. Mario Brothers being one of the worst, and Waterworld being one of the biggest bombs, because at the time it came out, it was the most expensive production ever for a feature film. So I don't think either of them are nearly as bad as their reputations would lead you to believe. And really, looking at them both together, they're both the kind of movies that are misfires that I find really admirable. They're the kind of movies that miss the mark, but you could tell that there was a lot that they were trying to do, and they're ambitious. There's a lot of effort that's put into this, even if certainly parts of it are pretty shoddy. There's still a lot of craft, I think, on display. I keep wanting to highlight one over the other, but it's really true for both. Like the world in Super Mario Brothers, when they get to they do call it the Mushroom Kingdom, even though it doesn't look like any version of the Mushroom Kingdom from any of the video games. But the look of that, the grimy, I mean, they're both kind of Mad Max inspired. You see like the cars in Mario Brothers, and everything grimy and metal and sharp and pointy and flames. And then of course the fungus everywhere. Like the way that world is realized, I don't know. There's a lot of detail in it, and I guess this is just maybe this isn't even fair. Maybe it's just looking back and roughly the kind of age that we're looking at. Like you mentioned briefly, Eric, going from practical to digital effects. Even if a movie is bad, if there's a ton of practical effects and a bunch of effort put into it, that goes a long way. Whereas if you watch something, I don't think it was when we hit record, but like beforehand, you mentioned like Fast and Furious, like that Hobbs and Shaw movie, that's bad, but there's no heart to it. You know what I mean? There's nothing about watching that kind of bad movie that's endearing at all. There's nothing to hang your hat on that connects you to that kind of a bad movie. But if you have a giant metropolis covered in fungus, and electric cars driving on top of each other, and Dennis Hopper naked in a mud bath. I don't know. There's something about like the specifics and the tactility of it that just makes it a lot more palatable, even if it isn't quote unquote good. And Waterworld, I think, is complete nonsense. It's just like the attempts at world building, and I guess if you could attempt at like calling some of these characters, the logic, the movie's complete nonsense. But I thought the set pieces were actually pretty great, especially that early one in that compound or whatever. Yeah. like that held up like much better than I had anticipated going into that rewatch. So yeah, I mean, pretty much everything that Kevin Costner does when he's not, fighting someone is complete and utter trash. But I mean, there is a fair bit of it because it's a pretty long movie, but I think that the set pieces and action and the ingenuity on display holds it together. So neither of them good, but both of them, I don't know. I'm not complaining at all on rewatches on either one of them, to be honest.
Yeah, I guess we're pretty much on the same page. I enjoyed Super Mario Brothers less than I expected, probably just because some of the stuff was so wonky. And yeah, I mean, I love Dennis Hopper. I love how he's the low rent bad guy in a lot of these 80s movies or whatever. But I just don't know what's going on with the Koopa stuff. It's just really, it's really weird and just kind of unsettling. It doesn't really fit much. I don't know. It's a fun movie, but man, it was kind of hard to sit through this time around. I had much less trouble sitting through Waterworld because, like I said, it was kind of funny because I remembered everything. Well, as it happened, it just all sprung back. I don't know. I guess, yeah, this Costner is just pretty unbearable in this film. I don't hate him all the time. I think he's pretty good in some stuff, or at least his character fits in some stuff. So this is post Dances with Wolves, of course, and he had a pretty huge hit with his Robin Hood version. So he was pretty much the king of Hollywood at this point. Was probably right around with the Will Smith era as well. So pretty much did whatever he wanted. But yeah, this movie eventually made it to him because it went through. They were kind of after some other people at first, but I agree with you. All that stuff falls flat. The villains are ridiculous in this film. I mean, everything is ridiculous in Waterworld, I guess, to an extent. But
I don't think it holds up to any like clarifying question. Like if you asked anything about how this world works, I don't think that the movie could answer it. Like how their ecosystem works, how people survive, where all these cigarettes are coming from.
Yeah, where are the cigarettes coming from? That's what I was thinking the whole time. I don't think any
question could possibly be answered based on the text of the film.
Yeah, because I believe it's at least a couple hundred years is what they imply since the world went to all water or something. So they still can't be smoking cigarettes from 100 and some years ago, can they? And these are, I don't know. Yeah,
they're
the logistics. Those? Yeah, the logistics don't make sense. Anyway, so, and these 200-year-old jet skis or whatever, but
right, yeah. So they have like the smokers. They have somehow, the whole world is water, but there's a cigarette factory and a Kawasaki plant that are still functioning.
So do you get the stuff, the Valdez and all that stuff? Was that something that you were old enough to remember?
No.
Okay, no. So where the smokers are hanging out their barge or boat or whatever, you can see at the very end as it's going down that it was the Exxon Valdez. Captain Joe's picture is up in the bridge, and he's like, the guy Deacon is, Captain Joe, we're doing this for you or whatever. So Captain Joe was a drunk captain of the Exxon Valdez that crashed it in Alaska and broke open and spilled oil. It was a huge environmental disaster shortly before this movie probably came out. So very topical at the time, but that was the boat or the big barge or whatever that the smokers were headquartered in. The Exxon Valdez. Good stuff.
Got it. That's a good joke. I wanted to, you mentioned Costner, and I think it's one of Ian's questions that he faxed along to us. But how did Kevin Costner become such a mega star for like a good 5-10 years? it seems pretty ridiculous. He's terrible in this. I just watched The Bodyguard for the first time, which you can hear me talk about in the latest episode of the Third Act podcast.
Huge hit, by the way.
He's terrible in that movie too. But yeah, Bodyguard, a huge hit. Robin Hood, a huge hit. I think he's in one of like your top 10 favorite movies, right? Isn't JFK?
JFK. Oh yeah, JFK. And he's not good in it. I think especially. I mean, he gets okay, but it's like the first 15 or 20 minutes of the film, he is really bad. Really bad. I don't know if maybe I get used to it or whatever happens later on in the film, but he's still not that good in it. But
I think I only like him in baseball movies. I don't know why that seems like I buy him in those roles, and like I don't really have any problems with him in those, and I like those movies to varying degrees. But any of his big action or big tentpole movies, I don't understand the appeal. He's not a good actor. He has terrible hair. He's not incredibly attractive or charismatic. Like I don't get it. I don't know how we all, whoever's culpable for this, I don't know how it happened.
Yeah, for me, the stuff I like of his is the two baseball movies. I love that golf movies, and I forget what it's called.
Tin Cup?
Tin Cup, yeah. I love Tin Cup. But, yeah, that's about it. I mean, Dances with Wolves is a good movie, but is he spectacular? Not necessarily, but he did direct that film, so that's a little bit of a different story there. Sounds like he pretty much directed this film. For the most part,
parts
too.
of it at least,
But, yeah, I agree. I think the set pieces are pretty good, pretty creative and stuff on how they're executed, but anytime there's not kind of fantastical set piece, it's just boring and silly. The logistics of the last thing that happens before, well, I guess with the smokers, where the bungee cord thing.
Yeah.
Were they not just going to all smash into each other anyway? I mean, I know the girl would have been in there, so that would have been bad, but not a well-planned maneuver by the three remaining smokers there, Christian.
Yeah, well, and Michael Jeter up there, he's been flying around for what, like 4 or 5 days at this point?
Yeah, at least.
And the only supplies he has happens to be a perfectly lengthed bungee cord. That's pretty much the only thing he has with him. I don't even understand like the where the film ultimately ends up, the final scenes. I don't really get the logistics of how that's possible with that area. I mean, I guess we shouldn't need to dance around spoilers, but there's like an island, right? How does that island exist? And then a few miles off, there's a city where the skyscrapers are well below the sea level. I couldn't really wrap my head around exactly how that worked ecologically. But that's what I'm saying. I don't think the movie makes really any sense at all. But the I don't know, all of the set pieces I was pretty in on. The end stuff on the Exxon Valdez was a little bit sillier. I think it's that first big action scene in that circular compound. That's the one that really like I was 100% in for that one. And the movie, I know Ian had mentioned that he was at least somewhat positive on both of these movies, and this I could imagine this rubbing him the wrong way. But watching Waterworld during the action sequences, this feels to me exactly like a theme park amusement ride. Like it feels exactly like that kind of pace and like realism, and that's what it's going for. Like it's like a Disneyland, Universal Studios type ride, and I like those types of things, so I'm 100% on board. And maybe I was a little bit more sensitive to this, but I got to ask you, Eric, because I watched this with my kids, which seemed totally fine for the vast majority of the movie. But then there's this one 10-minute sequence that's incredibly rapey that I was like, all right, let me just hit the fast forward button here. I don't know if that just rubbed me the wrong way because I was watching it with the whole family, but that scene feels completely out of place for the rest of the movie. The rest of the movie just seems like super, popcorn light action movie. Even though it's post-apocalyptic, it feels really kind of tame for the most part. And then that one scene just like completely threw me for a loop. It feels really out of place in this movie.
Yeah, and they end up just basically killing the guy and whatever. So it is a very dark, weird scene.
It's a very dark moment, and right at around the middle of the movie.
For some National Geographic magazine pages or whatever. So yeah, so Waterworld is what it is. Hopper at 11 on this one. I think he's good comic relief as well, which I guess he is somewhat in Super Mario as well. Actually, some of the stuff between when Hopper's kind of interacting a lot with the young girl in this film. The girl's a terrible actor, but Hopper kind of playing off of her is pretty good quality too. So Hopper, the only good thing about this cast-wise, it does work out.
Yes, agree there. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't help that the dialogue in Waterworld is really awful. It's probably most notable for the kid because they just give her really like precocious or just very unnatural dialogue to say. So it feels really forced. It's a prototypical bad child performance. Like when people talk about not enjoying child actor performances, this is the exact type of thing I think of. But yeah, I mean, Hopper's fun in both movies. I mean, just from like costuming and hair and all that, I mean, he's no slouch in Waterworld, but I think Super Mario Brothers edges it out just because of just the absurdity of it all. Like I mentioned, like the mud bath, or he like does that thing where his tongue gets really long and he's talking about monkeys and evolution. It's just so silly. Like his, it might be 100% of what he's asked to do in that movie is just pure silliness. And so I don't know. I find that a little bit more enjoyable. Does one Hopper performance edge out for you?
I
mean, it's pretty much the same thing.
They're the same thing. Yeah, they're the same thing. I guess funnier and just weirder is Mario, and just crazy Hopper at 11 is Waterworld. You remember the first time in Super Mario that we see Dennis Hopper? He's like down in the sewer or whatever, and he's wearing like a military uniform that's like fully, like those colonels in war movies got 100 of those plastic, whatever you call them, badges or whatever, and he's got the spikes on the like shoulders and stuff, and you never see that again. So that's just totally fucking out there too, but.
The Mario Brothers movie is so weird, and it's so bizarre because I mean, speaking stereotypically of Japanese culture, there's a lot of respect and honor that's valued. So it's maybe fitting that no one from Nintendo really spoke that negatively of it, even though it was a massive failure. Miyamoto, the creator of Mario, he said that he thought that it's so ridiculous. I can't believe this is true. But he said that he thought that the filmmakers were trying to be too close to the source material and that they forgot to make a good movie, which I can't, but I don't know if he's joking or if that's supposed to be tongue in cheek. I don't know how to read that quote because the movie obviously looks nothing like the video games. And there's all sorts of nods and references. They have like the green and red suits. They have things called Goombas, they have bombs, they have iconography, but none of it makes any sense. Like in the
weird jumping things,
right?
That they're both wearing, although there's only one set in the film that we ever see. But, right?
Yeah, I think they both get them at one point. But
do
just
they both
briefly,
get them? Okay, I don't even
think
remember
so.
Two pairs,
but
whatever.
But the like Goombas, like if there was one thing to describe Goombas from the video games, it's that they're small. And in the movie, they're the biggest characters, they're the biggest creatures in the entire movie. And if you were going to make something bigger, you would think like the bombs would be bigger, but they make them incredibly tiny. Like even when they do make references, they just almost intentionally seem to be trying to get it wrong or like mix it up. I mean, also, down the line, the idea that it's the Mushroom Kingdom's like a parallel universe that's split from our universe. I mean, so much of it just doesn't line up at all with the video games. But then they're just constantly making these nods with little things. Like one of the things I did forget was that guy who he's got a harmonica and he's playing the guitar for a while. That's Toad. Yeah. Like they call him Toad, and I was like, oh, I guess this is supposed to be Toad from the video games. I mean, it's really nothing. The only connection is the name. Like there's nothing else about that character that makes sense with the video games, but it's so weird. I mean, I guess I do agree with Miyamoto to some degree that the movie seems to keep trying to remind you that this is Mario Brothers, but it doesn't do, like the mushrooms things too, right? Like they keep seeing the little mushrooms on the fungus, but they don't remind you of anything in a way that's faithful. So it's almost like, what's the point? Like, why are you constantly making these nods and references if you're going to do something like so bizarrely different from what you're adapting?
Yeah, so some of the people this went through as it was being cast, pretty interesting. Apparently, Dustin Hoffman was interested and wanted to be Mario, but they did not think that fit very well, so they moved along. I think they wanted Bob Hoskins from the beginning. He actually didn't want to do it. He was tired of doing kids' movies. He just finished Roger Rabbit and stuff, and they had talked him into it with a number of rewrites or whatever. So as many rewrites as this thing went through, I mean, can you imagine how bad it must have been originally? Because the plot is not good. The plot and the writing's not good at all in this. You cannot fight for the plot or the writing in this film, right?
No, I don't think so. And who knows all the different versions of this that exist, how weird they looked. Like I forget who it was, Hoskins or Leguizamo. One of them like said in interviews that they were like prepping scenes to shoot with like a brothel or something, like just totally weird, dark, like completely inappropriate things for the type of movie that they were trying to make. So like I think Hoskins mentioned also like him and Leguizamo were drunk like every day of filming. Like it was just complete chaos on the set. But for all the movie's faults, honestly, I cannot say that casting is one of them. I like Hoskins, Leguizamo, Hopper, and Samantha Mathis in their respective roles. I think all of those fit like exactly. The movie could have looked a lot different than it is, but I'm totally fine with the casting for all of the main characters. You could first choice for Luigi, Tom Hanks. You could have had him. Oh my god, it's so ridiculous.
Schwarzenegger was approached to be Koopa. Passed on that. Danny DeVito was offered to be Mario and direct the film. So they wanted him to pull double duty. Did not happen, but
I could kind of see that one. Everything else you've mentioned sounds awful, like much worse than what we actually got. Danny DeVito involved, I could see working, but this is some good Bob Hoskins. I'm in on Bob Hoskins in this movie.
Yeah. So just to wrap up here, throw it back to WaterWorld for a second. I just wanted to give a couple of quotes here from that one. Kevin Costner himself says, "I'm very fond of the movie. It stands up as a really exotic, cool film. I mean, it was flawed for sure, but overall it was a very inventive, cool movie. It's pretty robust." So that's Kevin Costner from 2016. Dennis Hopper also really enjoyed WaterWorld. I thought it got a bad name for itself in the U.S., but it really did well in Europe and Asia. I think the studio sort of shot themselves in the foot by announcing all the budget trials and over budgetness and blah, blah, blah. It's going to be a failure right out of the gate, but I enjoyed it. So, yeah, and the financial numbers, $238 million to make. Domestically, it made $88 million. So,
not great.
Nope. Ended up doing real well in the home video department, so they actually made a bunch of money anyway, but giant flop. Dubbed by some as fish tar. Yeah.
I like Ishtar, too. Ishtar is better than both of these movies.
I do like Ishtar.
There's something I don't. Most notoriously bad movies aren't nearly as bad as their reputation, I think. I don't know. So to be, I mean, I'm sure that there's things I'm blanking on now. Like I remember there was that space movie with Eddie Murphy that was supposed to be the worst movie of all time, and that was truly terrible. But a lot of these movies with bad reputations are better than you would expect.
All right, so I guess, I don't have much left to talk about with Super Mario Brothers either, but they set us up for a sequel here, Christian, and did not deliver, unfortunately. Oh,
I
well.
thought about that constantly as a child. That was because I'm trying to remember other things I was watching around that time. Watching movies on VHS and being at Blockbuster every day, going through movies, that it's such an obvious setup for a sequel. Like, of course, tons of movies were getting sequels, but not all of them were set up like so cleanly, so obviously at the end of the movie. It's such a big nod to a sequel that it reminded me of the Back to the Future movies, which was complete by the time I was watching them as a kid. So, I would watch the first one and it would say, to be continued, or it would leave this big open-ended thing, or the second one, they concluded that. And so I always thought, and I didn't understand how box office bombs or sequels or any of that worked when I was 6-7 years old. I was just like, man, they talked about it. Like there's something going on in the Mushroom Kingdom. Daisy said it. Like where's the second movie? That plagued my thoughts constantly. But closing on Super Mario Brothers, I gotta ask, when compared with Trust the Force Will Be With You, how does Trust the Fungus compare? It's pretty close. I mean, Trust the Fungus is a great line, right?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it till you just mentioned that, but yeah.
Trust the Fungus.
So Toad here, played by a musician named Mojo Nixon, who I guess is kind of a big name in the bluegrass world. Apparently, to this day, he has a number of shows on Sirius and stuff, but apparently Tom Waits was who they wanted for the Toad role.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, unavailable at the time. So Mojo Nixon's agent pitched him as a third-rate Tom Waits that you can get for half the price. So that's how he sold his guy. So
sold.
That's good stuff. Yeah. Apparently Disney bought this film shortly before it went into actual principal photography. Sets were built and pretty much everything was ready to go, costumes and everything, and Disney demanded a bunch of rewrites. So they had to make rewrites around it to fit what they already had made. I said I was going to bring it around to one of the writers here. So 3 writers credited here. 1, Terry Runte, R-U-N-T-E. Terry Runte, a guy from Milwaukee, actually. And the reason I bring this up is because, so one of the guys that works for me used to be, he's in his early 60s now, but he used to be a bartender in Milwaukee through like the 70s and 80s at a music club where Terry Runte hung out and was a regular customer. And this guy had hung out with him a few times. The group that kind of hung around with each other rated women on what they called the T. Runte Richter scale. So he talks about that to this day. So, and rough story. So he had written a couple of films before this. One, I don't know if you remember Mystery Date, Christian, Ethan Hawke movie from like 1991.
Is it an adaptation of that board game? Wasn't that what that board game was called?
Yeah, that could be. I don't know.
I don't remember that movie. I had no idea it existed.
And apparently his next project was going to be something with John Huston directing. He took a trip to the Caribbean, to Jamaica, to do research for the film. I have not found any information on what the film is, but he did not return. And after some investigations and stuff, and catching a guy and him confessing to it, apparently he was beaten, robbed, and killed on a beach in Jamaica, and basically dumped into shark-infested waters after he was killed. So he's 38 years old. So about to, you're about to make a movie with John Huston, and rough there.
Tough break.
Very indirect connection to Terry Runty here that I had a little anecdote about. So that's that.
I have an even more indirect connection to director Annabelle Jankel, because at the most recent Telluride Film Festival that I attended with one Robert Gassaway of the Flicksation podcast, we sat in front of her for a screening at Telluride. And we heard them talking behind us, and she just happened to mention, "Oh yeah, I directed the Super Mario Brothers movie," and she was telling a couple anecdotes, nothing juicy. So I wish there was something really, really good and gossipy that I got out of it. But it's the weirdest humble brag I have, I think, out of anything I could possibly humble brag about.
Yeah, I sat next to a lot of high caliber folks at the Telluride Film Festival, and I don't know why the only one I ever really think of is sitting directly in front of Jeff Wells as he Jeff Wells'd his way through a conversation behind us and basically pissed off everybody he was sitting there with. So yeah, good stuff. So hey, Christian.
Yeah. I was gonna wrap up on the weirdness of I think it was the same day that Robert and I were in front of the director of Super Mario Brothers. We also were talking in line with the writer of Mortal Kombat Annihilation, the sequel film. So you never know, the stars are right there next to you, full access to them. Telluride Film, I mean, it's canceled this year, but the possibilities are limitless if you really think about it.
Yeah, me and Robert sandwiched Teller at the urinals the first night we were there. So there is that. Christian, we talked for over 45 minutes about these films. I was a little worried at what we could come up with here, being two guys short, and the one that really liked it not being on here. So hey, let's read his things for verbatim here, just because we forgot. So the minister said, "Feel free to mention I was a surprised admirer of Waterworld, and that Cyberpunk Mario Brothers is a minimum 4-star film. Why was Costner a thing? ? And how great is it that Hopper was the go-to blockbuster villain for 3 years?" So kind of touched on both those already, and yeah. Miss Hopper, man. We could use some of his villainous escapades today.
It's true. Good talk, Eric. I think this is exactly what the people needed right now.
Yeah. See, Ron, you haven't thought about it for 20 years, but you needed it. All right, Christian, I believe you'll be joining me for the next quarantine special, as we're going to talk some Hamilton and do a quick fix here with Robert Gassaway in the coming days. So looking forward to seeing you there, Christian. Always a pleasure.
Yep, I'll be there. And, in the meantime, catch me over on It's Only a Podcast, a Third Act podcast. I don't think I'll be talking about weird, awful movies on the quick fix. So I guess I'm breaking that trend. But if there's some weird announcement for something that you or Ian or anyone wants to talk about, I guess you can count me in for that as well.
All right. Fantastic. I'm having a blast with these quarantine specials myself. So I'm glad some of you guys are willing to rewatch some of these crazy films and dig into them, because, it's been a lot of fun, I think. All right. Thanks, everybody. Christian and I will be back in a few days. Until then, we will catch you on the flick side.